Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Criminal Profiling. Today is the first day we're going to be doing a serial killer, and he's a big one, the BTK killer, Dennis Rader. So for those of you who know true crime, probably already know a great deal about Dennis, and so he doesn't need no introduction for most people. Okay, this is a guy, for those who don't know him that well, after his first murder, and there'd be 10 murders by the way, after his first murder, it would take 31 years 1 month and 10 days to capture him. It's the longest I've ever heard. I think it took like 19 years for the Green River killer to be caught after his first murder, about 19 years, 4 months or something like that for Gary Ridgway. But anyway, I think BTK kind of is the longest that I have in my book. Could be wrong. But anyway, yeah, 31 years to capture this guy. Okay, so yeah. So, without further ado, first of all, golden rule, never look at an astrological chart or information about Dennis Rader prior to the show. If you're an astrologer, I hope you did not refresh yourself, okay? Because it ruins the profile. As mentioned, it ruins the profile every time, okay? So, this is the idea, is that we want to know what's in the chart before we do the chart, before we ever see it, okay? That's the idea. And to get an accuracy of 97 to 100%, not less. So, very strong words we need. Okay? So, without further ado, let's shrink the head, shrink the head, shrink the head. Okay. A lot of honorable mention has to go out to Catherine Ramsland. She's the reason I did BTK first, because she brought out a book called Confession of a Serial Killer, which I highly recommend. She's also got a few films on YouTube talking about the book that are just phenomenal, one from university. You learn a lot of things. Now, this book is basically Dennis Rader able to tell his story. That's what he always wanted to do. He had that opportunity with Catherine, who is a professor of forensic psychology. And she's written like 60-something books. She's good. Okay? So in this book, you're getting like almost 90% just BTK, okay, from his own mouth. And then she kind of keeps things on track and clarifies things and keeps things going throughout the book. So it's just an amazing, it'd be the best book you could possibly get on the subject, because anyone before that had to speculate what was going on with the BTK killer when he was on his down times and stuff, which had big ones, as you'll see. So for the first time, a book comes out where you don't have to speculate, and we find out that we believed a lot of things that weren't right before, that these other authors had speculated on. Okay, so it's really nice to get this nice, clean, and new and updated piece on the BTK killer, and that's what we're going to do today. So thank you, Catherine Ramsland. I took as much as I could from your stuff and made sure that my stuff was up to date. All right, so without further ado, we got a lot of work. I'm just going to kind of briefly go through this. You're going to see a lot of pictures. I want you to find the planet that represents Dennis Rader primarily. If there was one planet that would represent what he was about, find it before we do the chart. That's kind of your goal there too. Not just to write down words that you want to look up later, or you know, of your own words and stuff like that. Hopefully you have your charts in front of you. All our tables that are available in the description of the video. You can download all the tables, put them on your phone. You can print them out, which is best. Put them on your computers, and blah, 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 and use them. Okay? So, without further ado, I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to start my timer here because I want to go over a certain time. So, without further ado, we start at 4 minutes. Okay. Here we go. The early years. Okay, so make notes and try to find that planet. You can find them, no doubt, through the various correspondences of the planets, because it's only one planet. One planet to rule them all. That's right. So what planet is it that really captures the BTK? There's only one. It's just outstanding. So try to find that. Okay, by whatever means. It's a planet, not a sign or a house. That's all I can tell you. Okay, and have that ready by the end of the show so you can say, got it. Okay. If you can find it through just the general meanings, bravo. Okay, the early years. Okay, so let's get into this. I'm going to go through a few things about him, and we're going to go to a little bio. We're going to do his crimes, and then we do the chart. And I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, okay? So he's born in 1945. He's the oldest of 4 brothers. He grew up around Wichita, Kansas. That's the atmosphere he grew up in. Orgasmic conditioning set in early for Dennis. This plays a big role right here. When he was really young, his mother was doing something, cleaning the couch, when she had her hand in there and got the spring caught in between her finger and the ring. And she couldn't get it out, and she's pulling and yanking, and it's hurting. And she's looking at Dennis, saying, "Dennis, go get help. I can't get out. I'm stuck. Help me." And so he sees this pain, this helplessness on her face, and he gets turned on by this. He's completely turned on by this moment. So he doesn't run away and get help right away. He's like standing there turned on with this, right? Interesting. Okay, so he became aroused at her expressions of fear, pain, panic, and helplessness, and he would seek to recreate this expression in all of his future victims. Very important, right? Very important. Okay, fear, pain, panic. That's what he wants to see. That's what's his turn on, okay? That's one of them. Big one. Okay, and that was from his mother when she gets a ring. Strange, I know. But, you know, they think people can gel to things in really strange ways. So that's orgasmic conditioning, if you want to Google that or something on your own time. Now, Dennis discovered he liked roped and bondage and stuff, especially, and he kind of, what cemented this sexual kind of thing with him, this orgasmic conditioning and whatnot, is that after a teacher at school berated him, he followed her home. He went to her home, probably at night, and was watching her through her window, probably her bedroom, and as she was undressing, whatever, he's got a piece of rope around his waist. He's already taking a huge liking to rope. He tightens it as he's watching her and totally gets off on it and orgasms, watching his teacher and doing this rope thing. So the two things have already bonded together. What turns him on, okay? So he discovers, get this, by the time he's still an adolescent, he's discovered that not only does he like this bondage thing, this look of fear and helplessness and the bondage situation, but also murder. He's thinking about strangulation. He's wanting to strangle. And he's already considering that that's what he's going to do. By the time he's an adolescent, he knows that's what he wants to do. So he's already picking up magazines and books on the subject just to gather force and to learn about it, what he plans on doing. So this is at a very young age, okay? So that's very important too, okay? So he developed a condition called paraphilia, where one gets arousal from what is considered abnormal or dangerous. For Dennis, it was rope and bondage from which he could relive his need to see fear and panic on the faces of the women as they slowly died via suffocation or strangulation. That's basically it in a nutshell, right? Dennis would know he wanted to be a murderer, blah, 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 and that it would involve strangulation and bondage. So from a young age, he's right into it. He did not torture animals, as some other books said. He got this came about from when he went to his grandmother's barn. And she lived on a farm type thing, and she hated cats. And he offered to get rid of the cats to help her out. So what did he do? You got it. Strangled them. And he found that the noises the cats made as they were strangled and in fear of themselves and going through their own stages of death, that they made sounds that reminded him of a woman in pain and fear. He probably just made that, that's just what it reminded him of for, whatever sick reason. Maybe it does sound like that. I don't know. But whatever, that's one of the things. So he didn't go around killing and hurting animals for that reason. It was all about bondage for the animals too. He was getting into the strangulation thing. And later, barns and silos would become a huge thing to Dennis Rader. He always wanted to take victims to barns and silos. He drew a really complex silo for Dr. Catherine Ramsland, where up and down one side to the other is torture stuff for women in different types of bondage and torture. And there's even a train in there. So what the train is, so he's got barns and silos, which plays a huge role. Also trains, which I suspect are from the same neighborhood where his grandmother lived. So he used to fantasize about putting a victim on the tracks of the train and watching their expression, not only as they suffocated and stuff, but were still alive, but as the train was coming, was going to chop them into pieces, right? So that's kind of where he's at, with barns and silos, okay? So he wasn't out torturing animals as typical of the serial killer childhood thing that we often associate. He was actually helping to get rid of the cats and killed two birds with one stone. Got rid of the cats for the grandma, satisfied his need for strangulation on the other. Okay, and he's quite young yet. He hasn't killed anyone yet. So this is he's going to move on to people. From cats to people. So that's where the train comes in. Later, he would use stamps and different things that had a train on it. Everything is associated with. You'll see later. This guy's totally into codes and shit. So he grew up liking detective magazines, which often depicted bound and helpless women. Okay, you've probably seen those magazines yourself. I'm surprised they even allowed that. Okay, now Rader did grow to believe that women held too much control over him. His mother, his grandmother, teacher, stuff like that. So you might want to keep that in mind. The doctor did mention that, and she kind of pondered on that herself. All right. so that he believed that women held too much control over him. So he had favorite serial killers, okay, because now he's studying serial killers. He wants to be one himself really early on, okay, in his age. He wants to be a serial killer. So he likes Harvey Glatman, who, by the way, also bound women and took pictures of them in fear, just the way he liked, and probably saw those photos. I think I have one that I can put up here. So hopefully that's one showing right now. He also liked H.H. Holmes, what they call the America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, because he built like a torture castle. So he probably liked H.H. Holmes for that torture castle that he was famous for. If you don't know H.H. Holmes, you can always look that up. We'll be doing him eventually anyway. So there you go. He also took a fancy to In Cold Blood, that true crime book, In Cold Blood, about the Clutter family, all right? And the two guys that did that were Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, which we'll be doing someday too. So the Clutter family, he likes that story because what do they do? They tie the family up. That automatically turns him on. That's right up Rader's alley. Okay? And they stole a radio from that home when they left. They stole a radio for some reason. Well, at the very first crime scene of Rader, he steals a radio at his first crime scene, as well as, I think, the father's watch, as you'll see. But he steals the radio. See, he mimics a lot of people. He doesn't come up with a lot of original stuff. And this will also go for his poetry and other things. Even his signature, he does a special signature, was taken mainly from the Zodiac. He denies it, but it's pretty obvious. He spent 4 years in the U.S. Air Force as a mechanic, and he often fancied himself a spy, both in and out of the Air Force. He really fancied himself and had these fantasies that he was a spy, a really important spy, really intellectual, dangerous spy. A lot of fantasy with this guy, okay? So that keeps going too. So he married in 1971. He gave birth to a son in 1975 and a daughter, Carrie. In 1978, Carrie has her own book out about that, and it also has a lot of videos on YouTube and interviews and her own stuff on YouTube where you can watch her talk about her dad. He was considered a very good dad in all respects, and to the children themselves. He really treated them, okay, so he wasn't super good to them because he's putting them in danger. They're going to lose their dad because he's out killing people. But, I mean, by and large, he didn't beat them. He treated them good. He was always there for them. He didn't go out murdering because he was too busy with them. And that was a lot of the downtime, too. Because when he was being a father, he was being a father. Interesting, okay? So he loved to communicate in codes. He was obsessed with codes. Everything's a code to this guy. Everything. He was obsessed with the number 3. And every address of every victim had to have a 3 in it, or the place had to be divisible by 3. Somehow there had to be a 3 involved in any of the addresses he went to. There's always a 3, it seems, right? And that's just to show his obsession with kind of that sort of stuff. And his codes were not like the codes of the Zodiac. They were childish and not that smart. He thought they were really intellectual codes, okay? They weren't. In fact, Catherine, he sent Catherine one, the author, when he was first getting to know her. She had to crack some codes. It's like a word find. You know those things where you find a word in all the jumbled letters? It was just finding words like teacher, or this, or a partial address of somebody. It was just actually ridiculously kind of childish, actually, okay? So that's kind of the level, but he sees it as high intellect. He does not see himself as others see him. There's something really blind about that, and his writing is atrocious. His spelling is atrocious when he writes letters to the police and stuff. Really atrocious writing. What he sees and what is two different things. He seems to be kind of disillusioned about himself in many ways, okay? And it seems to play out in his spelling, how he thinks he's one thing, but he's another, and he thinks that we can't see what is so obvious, because he's kind of got a blind spot about himself, okay? He thought he was a lot brighter than everybody else, and he was really much. It would come out later that he was a narcissist in a big way. Okay, he had a lot of vanity, narcissism, stuff like that, and that'll come out. Okay, so he graduated from the Wichita State University with a major in administration of justice due to his love of serial killers and wanting to be one. Okay, this is after he murdered some people. You'll see in the years later that he goes to university for 4 years and comes out with a degree in administration of justice, which was actually to help him become a better serial killer. That's why he took it. Rader is very active in the church and was appointed the president of the church council. A very active guy in the church. Okay, and his wife and his whole family, blah, blah, blah. He was also a scout leader. He often snuck away from the camp to dress up in bondage stuff, and as a woman sometimes in bondage. And there's going to be a lot of those pictures I'm going to be showing today too as we go along, okay? So study them too and try to get some psychology out of that as we go along. He would go through a lot of, I noticed that he would go through a lot of trouble to do these bondage shots that he could relive the fantasy over and over when he wasn't able to go out murdering, right? He would do these photos and dress up in bondage and then look at them after, and that would help keep him, stimulated in between murders. He would dig an actual grave at one case. You'll probably see a picture there. He dug an actual grave. His head sticking out, man. He went through a lot of trouble, and he had to be, I think, pretty physical. So I'm kind of considering how physical this guy is. Look at some of those pictures. He's up like many feet in the air. Is he pulling himself? Like, how is he doing all this? And it's interesting. He has to be pretty physical, right? His wife catches him twice over the years. Nearly left him. Freaked her right out. She's a churchgoer, very simple. And there he is dressed up as what you're probably seeing now. Pretty frightening, because what he finds really exciting and sexual is kind of creepy. So let's get into the murders. The very first, okay, but now there's a couple things about him. He's got his set patterns, which were pretty good. He's got some, he's got his MO there. So every house that he goes to, he always cuts the phone line so they can't call for help if something should happen, right? He's always cutting the phone line, first thing, snipping the phone line with wire cutters. That was part of his MO, okay? He's got a few things going on with his MO, as you'll see. So 1974, January 15th, the first murders. He's focused in now these murders, when he picks someone, they become what they call his project. And he titles them all Project this or Project that. I don't really care about any of that. But they're all projects to him. And what he does first is he kind of trolls around the area, gets used to it, who's around, what's going on. Then he does what he calls his stalking, where he gets closer. He's checking their mail for names, who all lives there, what's going on, what do you got going. When are you home? When are you not home? Sometimes he'll go to a person's work and see them working, see when they get off. Sometimes he'll interact with them at the store. He's done all that. This is his stalking kind of thing, where he gets information about the person he's going to kill. And I think that builds up the thrill, too. He's building up his own thrill. I think that's often a very sexual part of it, too. But that's just my own thoughts on it right now. So his first murders are going to consist of 4 people, because he thinks he does great research, but often is the case as you find out that he doesn't do great research. He's supposed to do great research. He says he does. But when he goes to the Otero family, now he's honed in on the mother and the daughter. He saw them outside the home and thought something about them. Sometimes it's the eyes or some this and that. This is what he said in interviews. Sometimes it's the eyes. That's all it might take. Or just something about them says, you're my project. So he's got this project, mother and daughter, right? But so he does all his work, and on the day he goes there, they're coming out, he's kind of coming in, okay? He pulls a gun to get, and then he says, I'm from California, I'm wanted, I need a car, I need some cash, I need some food. He does this on purpose over and over as part of his MO too, as he puts it, to comfort them. To ease them and to comfort them. I think it's just to help to keep the situation low key so what he does is he says, I need to tie you up so you don't call the police when I split with your car. And then that way, by the time you get loose, I'll be long gone. So he tricks them almost in the way of John Wayne Gacy tricks young boys into putting the handcuffs on, the handcuff trick, right? That's what it reminded me of a little bit. Okay, so let's go on. So he goes in there, and lo and behold, the father's home. He didn't expect that. Okay, the older Joseph, he's aged 38, is home. Okay, so he's got an extra person there. He expects the mother, the daughter, and the youngest son, Joseph, who's only 9 years old. He expects them to be there, but he's shocked. They have a dog. He didn't know that. They have 2 other sons who aren't home right now. He didn't realize that either. So that's not very good. So what he does is he goes in, he takes them all into one bedroom, ties them all up. Now he wants to go into the suffocation stage. This is his first murder. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's winging this whole thing. So he goes for the father first, tries to suffocate him. He puts the bag over his head, puts the rope. Okay, he starts suffocating. He goes on to his next victim while he's suffocating, because that's not his focus. He wants to get rid of the dad. Well, doesn't his dad bite a hole in the bag? So he goes back and has to do him again. So this time what he does is he puts a sweater over his head, then puts the bag, and then ties it. So when he's trying to bite the bag, because he's supposed to bite, now he can't get to the bag to put a hole in it. He suffocates to death. Okay, so he's trying to strangle the mother and the daughter. The mother, he thinks she's dead. He strangled her. He goes on to the daughter. He's just going one to the other. He's just trying to get the job done at this point because I think he wanted to spend more time with the daughter, right? But he's strangling the daughter now, right? Then the mother wakes up and she sees him doing something to the son. Now maybe he was over to the son doing he's going to kill the 9-year-old, right? He's got the bag. The mother pleads with him, says, don't kill my son, right? So he says, all right. So he comforts her. Again, comfort, there's that word. Takes the bag off the kid, takes the kid into another room, comes back. So the mother's like, oh, thank God, you're not going to kill my son at least. Then he kills the mother. This time he kills the mother because he didn't kill her the first time. He kills her. Well, he tried to kill Josephine, the 11-year-old, and she comes back too. She's not dead. So he's not even used to how long to strangle somebody before they're actually dead. So she comes back too. So he goes into the bedroom after the mom's dead, kills the 9-year-old, strangulation, bag over the head, strangulation. I think he stuck around and watched him. I think I read that somewhere and watched him die. Then he went back and got Josephine. Now he's got one victim left. He takes Josephine to the bedroom, to the basement, throws a rope over a drainage pipe, and pulls her up and ties her off so that she's slowly strangling. As she's slowly strangling, he's got her pants off. She's semi-undressed now. There's actually some victim pictures online you can actually see. I don't know if I have that one or if I'm allowed to show it, but it actually shows her the position she's in. He's masturbating while she's dying and suffocating. So they find seminal fluid both on her, on her and on the floor, something like that. But around her. So he's like watching her, and I don't know if she's already dead. He said she was already dead in one of the court things I saw, but I think he might have been lying there. I think he did it while she was suffocating. I think that to see that fear in her eyes, that's what turns him on. So that's what's more likely happening. Okay, so there he's murdered for the first time. He's got 4 bodies. He knew he would have 3, but he's got 4 because dad's home. Okay, so. Did I miss anything about that? Nope. Okay, he brings what he calls a hit kit. That's what he calls it. He says it's often in a briefcase. Like I said, he thinks he's a spy. So he brings a hit kit with him. That's what he calls it. That contains his rope and bondage equipment and all the other stuff. Sometimes a camera, blah, 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 knives, gun, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so there we go. I think I got everything there for that murder. For those murders, I should say. And he cleaned up after himself. He calls it the right-hand rule. He cleans up after the murder. All right. And later that year, in October, 3 guys were arrested as suspects for that murder of the Otero family. They were going to be up for the murder. Well, Dennis wanted no part of that because he wants the credit. He plans on being the greatest serial killer that ever lived. So he for the first time, writes into the police, kind of, and makes himself known. And he writes a letter. He puts it inside of an engineering book in the library and then directs them to go and get this book, right? So an investigator goes to the library, finds the letter, and inside the letter, for the first time, he's named himself. He gave himself a name, BTK. And he said, bind them, torture them, kill them. Bind, torture, kill. That's what it ends up as. So that's how he's to be referred as. I'm not sure if he had his little signature already made up yet, which he stole kind of from the Zodiac to make his own signature. He's never very, not always the most original person. Okay? So that's basically it. So he writes in and tells them why he wants the credit. So they had to let the other guys go free. Interesting. They were probably going to hang for that, eh? Those other 3 didn't even do anything. So this is an indication that he's a narcissist and vanity. That's kind of the first indication that this is a guy who really likes the attention, wants the attention, is looking for the attention. Okay? He's looking for fame as a serial killer. Right. So what was particularly bad in that murder was that the family members could see each other being strangled to death. Ouch. Right. Okay, that's nasty. Okay. Now, 1974, he's going to go on to his second murder kind of thing, well, his second location. Okay, and now we're into, the ages of those people, the first ones, okay, let's just quickly go through. The Otero family, the father of Joseph was 38. Mother, Julie, she was 33. The daughter, Josephine, was 11. And Joseph Jr. was age 9. Okay, so we've got those 4 murders. Now, April 4, 1974, he's already targeted a girl named Catherine Bright, who is age 21. So he knows about her home. He knows all kind of about her. Knows she's not going to be home. He breaks into her home. Of course, he's cut the phone line too, of course. They can't phone for help. So he's in there waiting for her, lying in wait. This becomes an MO of his. He likes to break in there and wait for them, either jump out of a closet, around a corner, startle them, take control, right? That's what he's doing here. He's inside the home. She comes home, but she's not alone. She's with her brother Kevin, right? So he pulls out the gun. He takes control of them. He gets one to tie up the other, and then he ties up the other one in separate bedrooms. He's got Catherine in one, Kevin in the other. So he's in there with Catherine doing his thing, right? He's going to go strangle Kevin and get rid of him. So he goes into Kevin after he gets Catherine bound. He goes in to strangle Kevin. Well, doesn't he get loose from his bonds and a fight ensues? So he pulls out the 22 and shoots him in the head, right? And he drops. He sees the blood, so he figures he's gone. So he goes back to Catherine. So he's with her, and he hears movement. He goes back again to finish the job, right? Because he hears Kevin moving around. So again, Kevin is actually pretty feisty, and they start scuffling again. He has to shoot him again. He shoots him again in the head. I think he got him here the second time, here the first time, or here the first time and here the second. I'm not sure which he did first. I thought it was a head here first, here second, or here first, and then there second. I'm not sure. But those pictures are online, but I can't put them up because it's pretty nasty. But they do show a picture of Kevin. And he lived. So he shot him in the head, right? He goes back to Catherine. He hears him moving yet again. He goes back and he shoots him again. So he's now been shot twice, okay? Like literally. And so he goes back to Catherine again. Next thing you know, he hears Kevin again. This time he looks out. Kevin's taken off out the front door with 2 shots in his head, still alive, because the 22 wasn't strong enough, I guess, and didn't hit him in the right spots. And he's gone down the street. So now Dennis is like, oh my God, he's going to get help. I got to get out of here. So he runs in and finishes the job with Catherine, who's fighting like with everything she's got. So he can't strangle her the way he would like to. He stabs her. But I read once where he stabbed her in the chest, but then I'm listening on a film now. He says he put the knife up under both sides of the ribs, up, and then he went up from under the ribs. That's how he stabbed her. So that's interesting. I always thought it was the chest. There you go. So now she dies from that. She doesn't live. So, and he quickly cleans up. He goes to steal their car. The keys don't work. He has to run to his car, but he does make it there. He does get away. He thinks the police are on the way because Kevin can identify him. But they don't. They put out a picture that he's just not identified, so he gets away with that. Okay. So now he's up to 5 murders. He waits 2 years, 11 months, and 13 days before the next murder. That's a long time. So he's going to wait 2 years. 1977, on March 17th, he's targeting Shirley Vian Relford. This is an unplanned murder. His first target wasn't home, and she was supposed to be home. Remember, he researches them. And again, he's got good and bad luck all the time, this guy. So he's got an unplanned murder. What he does was he sees a kid on the street. He goes up and he shows him a couple photos and says, hey, kid, can you ID these people? Have you seen them in the neighborhood? No? Okay. So he follows the kid home, kind of. He sees where he goes, figures his mom must be home because he's too young to be alone. He goes up, he knocks on the door. The same kid answers. Now the mother or whoever comes to the door and he's like, I'm Detective so-and-so. Do you reckon I'm trying to ID these 2 people? Do you recognize them from the neighborhood or whatever? They're like, no. He pulls out a gun, forces them in. And there's more kids home there. He forces all the kids into a bathroom and locks them in there. He takes Shirley into a bedroom. The kids start making a huge ruckus. He goes back with the help of Shirley. He gets Shirley to help. They throw in some toys, some blankets, as Dennis would later say, to comfort and ease them. He's always using that word, comfort. Want to comfort them before I kill them. He actually contemplates killing those kids, if anybody's wondering. So they lock him in there. Now they got some stuff to keep them, some toys and blankets, like that's going to do anything. The doors open a bit, and one of those boys watches the entire episode of his mother being strangled to death. Okay, and he just lives a life of problems after that. It's actually pretty sad. I've seen some videos on him all grown up, and it's pretty sad, the effect. It's pretty devastating. So, unplanned murder. Okay, she's dead. He watches. Now she throws up. After they lock the kids in there and she's all upset, she throws up. He goes and gets her a glass of water. He comes back, as he says, gives her a glass of water, and then comforts her for a while. He comforts her and puts her at ease, and then he strangles her. Okay, so that's basically what he did. Okay, after he comforted her. And then he quickly cleaned up and left because the kids were making so much noise, so he couldn't stick around too long. There's just too much noise. They were trying to break out of that bathroom, right? And to save their mom. So he leaves, and he's not caught. Okay? So now, 1977, December 8th, same year. Okay? Now we're going on to the 6th victim. This is the lady's name. He's targeting a lady named Nancy Fox, who's age 25. This is his favorite one because she lived in a little pink house. He liked the fact that it was pink. She's very petite and attractive, just the way he likes. She's easier to control when they're petite but attractive. So she's got that. He likes everything about it. So he goes in there and does the whole thing, the whole spiel. He's cut her phone line, does the whole thing. And this murder is his favorite, he says, because he could take as much time as he wanted. There was no pressure, nothing going on, no kids, no dogs, nothing to worry about. He took as much time as he wanted. It was his best murder. Okay. So after that murder, when he leaves, he goes and calls 911 to tell the police that 911 to tell the dispatcher there that there's been a murder at this address. You better go there. Her name's Nancy Fox. He does that. He wants the credit right away. He wants to see it on TV. He just can't wait. He's getting kind of cocksure of himself. He's pretty cocksure of himself to do that. Okay? So now he's done that murder. He waits 7 years and 4 months and 19 days before the next murder. 7 years. They think he's moved away, dead, in jail, given up, too old. They've given up on him. They thought he's gone. BTK is long gone. 7 years later. Well, in 1978, that's in 1977. In 1978, he did send a poem, right? About victim Shirley Relford. That's the unplanned murder. Okay, which is interesting, unplanned. Okay, for him to do that. So he sends a poem about her named Curly Locks, obviously stolen from, Goldilocks, right? And claiming, in that letter, he also claims responsibility for the murders of Relford, Shirley V. and Relford, and the Fox, Nancy Fox murder, as well as an unnamed victim. That would have been Catherine Catherine Bright, with her brother Kevin there. So he does an unnamed victim as well there. So that he does communicate in 1978, right? So you could say 6 years, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, okay. But this is between murders, keep in mind. 7 years between murders. So in 1979, he graduates from university in 1979. So he's already got how many murders under his belt, right? 6 murders or something like that? Yeah. 7? What are we up to? 4, 5, 6, 7 murders. We're up to 7 murders. Okay? So he graduates from university after 7 murders from the administration of justice. He's majored in that. He's graduated after 4 years. So that's what he was busy, 4 years, going to university and stuff and honing in his skills. That's where he was for 7 years as well, and raising a family and stuff. He's got kids and whatnot. Okay? Excuse me. Now, now in 1979, he did plan a murder. He goes and waits for a victim that he names Anna, right? That's his project. Well, he thinks Anna is this young, attractive lady, but it's actually the person he saw leaving that house was Anna's daughter. She doesn't live there. So he's mistaken that. So he thinks she's Anna. So he goes up, he's looking at the letters. Oh, that's her name there. So he's looking in the mailbox and stuff and gathering information about her. So he goes in there, he breaks into the home and waits for Anna to come home. She never comes home. So he leaves and aborts the mission, the project. And but he does send Anna a letter and said, hey, guess who was there? Me, BTK. So that freaks her out. And she actually moves out of state. She sells the home and moves right out of state out of fear. Don't blame her. But then he had the wrong lady all along. He was thinking of her daughter and not her. So there you go. He would have been surprised when Anna came home and it wasn't Anna. So there you go. Now we're going all the way to 1985, okay? The next murder, 1985. April 27. Maureen Hedge is actually his neighbor. She's 53 years old, a petite little woman. Even his daughter Carrie knows her. They wave to her all the time when they see her outside. So he breaks one of his own cardinal rules about murdering in your own backyard. But he, for years he'd seen her and not thought anything. And then all of a sudden, boom, I want her. She's my next project. So there you go. That's how quick it can happen. She was probably doing something. He was in that mood thinking, and the two things just bonded, right? The two ideas. And she became the next project. So he also breaks his MO, okay? He starts changing up his MO. Interesting. He's learned a lot in school, right? And so he's changed up his MO. he takes the body from the house. Never does that. Okay. Remember, it's been 7 years too. So he goes there. He does the whole thing. He waits inside. He strangles her, bag over the head, does everything, cutting, the whole thing. She came home with another man, a date, and he was going to kill him. But the guy left after about an hour, and then Rader waited until the wee hours of the morning before he came out and actually pounced, right? So he did. He turned on a bathroom light, shocked her, surprised her, pounced her, took her to the bed, and then, of course, he strangled her on the bed using a plastic bag and rope, his typical MO, until he removes her body. So what does he do with the body? He takes it to his church, where he's a president. I think it's called the Lutheran Church. He takes her body to the church, puts plastic up over the windows so nobody can see in the basement, takes her down to the basement. There's all these robes that the girls wear from the choir and everything behind him in the pictures, because he's taking pictures. So he sets this body up, different poses. So he's posing this corpse of his neighbor so he can relive it later, taking all these photos, just like he takes photos of himself, okay? Takes a lot of photos of Maureen Hedge. And then he puts her body back in the car and dumps it in a ditch fairly close to her residence. He also takes her car and dumps her car somewhere. So he's got this whole thing where he's trying to send police on a wild goose chase, and it works. They don't link the crime to him. So that's important. So they're still at, the police stop at 7 murders in the end. They only know about 7 murders. He has to clarify 3 murders for them. Okay? Now the next one, he waits a year and 4 months and 20 days. Okay? And her name is Vicky Wajiri or something. 1986, September 16, 1986. He's waited a year, 4 months, and 20 days since Maureen. So he didn't wait too long for this one. And she's aged 28. Okay? So he honed in on her after he heard someone playing the piano. He's like, he liked the song, drew him in or something. And he looks, and it's a woman. That woman is now his target. So that's the piano that did it. That's what he says himself. So he goes very elaborate here. He's getting right into his serial killing thing, remember? He's made a complete telephone repairman thing, complete with the logo, whatever he did. He gone head to toe, telephone repairman. He's kind of walking door to door in that neighborhood, comes up to her door. So when people see anything, they say, yeah, there was a telephone repairman, and then they'll go to the telephone repair places looking for the killer, right? And he's not a telephone repairman. So, but that also gives him a way in. He may have taken that from the Boston Strangler, who did stuff like that, right? Went to the door, said he was this or that, and they would let him in. Kind of reminds me of that. He also reminds me of Colonel Williams a little bit, because he dresses up in the women's clothes. You remember Colonel Williams from Trenton, Canada? He was with the Air Force, one of the biggest up in the Air Force, and then he had a couple of murders there and would take pictures of himself wearing these clothes that he stole after breaking into homes and stealing girls' underwears and stuff like that. He would wear them and take pictures. So that kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Colonel Williams. And also of, there's another one from Toronto, Bruce MacArthur. Also posed his corpses and took pictures of them. Scars hanging out of their mouth, fur coats. Remember that? With Bruce MacArthur? That kind of reminded me a little bit, too, of when he's posing Maureen in the bottom of the church, taking pictures of the corpse in different poses. Just as an aside, that's what that reminds me of when I'm going through this stuff. So we're back to Vicky. So yeah, he kills her. And that's a very high-risk murder. So, but he's dressed up for the occasion, as you know. When he's a spy, he's dressed up as a the telephone repairman. Probably already cut her wire when he went up there, cut the phone wire. Oh, look, it is dead. But anyway, so that's how she lets him in, because he's going to check out her phone. And of course, we know what happens to that. The typical bag, bondage, slow suffocation thing. Okay? Her husband's coming home for lunch and actually sees his car being driven down the street. It's BTK taking her car to some place and dumping it just to throw police off and stuff like that. Okay? So it's broad daylight in a very busy area, very busy time of day. So very high risk crime. Okay? Now he waits 4 years, 4 months, and 3 days before the next murder. 1991, Dolores D. Davis, aged 62. Okay, now Rader used he was camping out with he was a scout leader, right? This guy, scout coach or whatever. So he's out with the Cub Scouts or whoever they are, the Camp Scouts. And he slips away and kills his target, who's close to that area. He has a target out there. okay, named Dolores D. And he calls this Project Dogside because there's a kennel right beside her. She also was a dog lover. I don't know if he knew that or not, or knew both, but there was a dog kennel next to her home as well. And she was kind of in a rural area, I think. There we go. And so Vicky Wedgeri was age 28. I don't know if I mentioned that, okay? The one played piano, just the one before. Now we're going 4 years ahead to Dolores, okay, 1991. Okay, so he's waited 4 years. This guy waits a lot of time sometimes between murders, doesn't he? So basically he's going in there. He does his usual thing, but he breaks the MO again. This is really surprising. I found this surprising. He picked up a cinder block and threw it through her patio window. Like literally smashed a cinder block through. Now, granted, her house is fairly secluded, so nobody's bound to hear. But maybe this was to throw police off, because this is very not much like him, to throw a cinder block to gain entrance. That's really crude, right? So interesting that he would do that. She come running out because she thought a car drove through her patio window. She gets the BTK instead. Okay, he would strangle her with a pair of nylons. So he still did the usual MO, strangulation, so slow suffocation, Now, the thing about her is he removes her body again, breaking his MO. He takes her body somewhere, dumps it. The next day, he gets this idea like, I should have taken pictures. So he grabs his camera, goes back to the body, another big risk to take. He's getting more comfortable. He finds the body, but now the dogs or the wolves or whoever in that neighborhood, the animals of that area have already ripped her face apart and parts of her body. So he got this woman's mask that he often wears himself when he's doing his own bondage. You'll see it in some of these pictures. That woman-like face, he puts that on her because her face has been eaten. And so that she looks fairly okay. And then he starts taking pictures and posing for future fantasy. Because he's fantasy-oriented, this guy. Okay? Extremely fantasy-oriented. That's a big thing with him, okay? So there again, these police are not linking him to these crimes because he's been gone for ages, as they think. He's been gone for 10 years. Well, he's out still murdering and stuff, and they don't know because they're not linking these crimes to him because they're done differently. They're looking for other types of people and not, linking the crimes to him. So this is his studies paying off, you might say. Okay, so 1991 to 2005 was a cooling period, massive. A lot of people that wrote books about him speculated that he was on downtime and just didn't bother, right? Well, in fact, he had 55 projects going, as we later find out from Catherine, who he works with doing the book. He was not idle. He had broken into several homes. He had multiple targets. It just didn't work out, whether it was timing or he got there and things just didn't pan out and he had to abort. But for whatever reason, he just couldn't get around to killing anybody for that time. That's a long time, 1991 to 2005. So there you go. Okay. Let's see. So that's his cooling period. His wife caught him, of course, doing this a couple times. He's sneaking away with the Cub Scouts and taking more pictures of himself whenever possible. And reliving things at home he takes things from all his victims. He keeps trophies all the time to relive stuff, okay? He's always doing that. Now, in March 2004, there was an attorney who was going to write a book about the BTK killer, who hasn't been seen for decades or whatever, and he's going to tell his story. Well, of course, Rader's not going to have any part of that. So he gets a hold of them right away with a letter, proves that it's him by sending some stuff in, I think, a driver's license and some photos that he took for proof. And now they know he's alive, okay? And that there's no point in this attorney. The attorney would have to rewrite his book, right? Because he's not gone, and he's got a story to tell. So he's rivaling this attorney. He wants to tell his own story. He actually writes a whole table of contents for a book that he wants to do about himself and sends it into them too. Just remembered that. Okay, so he's starting to, now between 2004 and 2005, he's sending all this stuff out. He's communicating all the time, not doing murders, communicating. He sends out coded packages, toasty cereal boxes, and inside the box would be a doll with the same color hair of one of his victims. There'd be a rope around the neck, say, and then a rope leading to something. Like, for instance, he did a doll with one of his first victims, Josephine, the 11-year-old, who took to the basement and hung by the drainage pipe. So there, He got a dark-haired doll, put a rope around the neck, probably bound the feet, and the rope leads to a little piece of plastic toy drainage pipe, about that big. I think I have a picture of it up here. So he sends that into place, and he sends other dolls. He's sending all this stuff, and he's sending little codes that would, and looking for cereal boxes where the letters B, BTK would be somewhere funny. He's making up names that begin with B, with bind, torture, kill, but, Bob, Thomas, such and such, just making up names, anything with little codes. But like I said, they're easy to figure out and they're childish, kind of. So they're not deep codes. They're not deep intellectual. Okay. So in 2005, everybody knows this story. He sends a floppy disk. He talks to a police officer. He says, can you track down a floppy disk? Right? And he confirms it with the police or whatever. And they confer back and forth through the newspaper, through codes. So he's called Rex. So he says, if it's, please tell the truth. He's telling the police to tell the truth because he's asking a valid question. He expects them to tell the truth because they are law enforcement. This is always his mindset as well. He expects them to tell the truth. They're trying to catch him. And he thinks they're not going to lie because they're police, right? Right. Honestly. So he sends, so they write back, no, Rex, it's okay that you send in this floppy disk, that it can't be traced back to him. He doesn't know he knows computers a little bit, but he doesn't know about the metadata and what it can do, etc. Still fairly new. He uses the church computer to write a letter on, sends it, but as the floppy disk, deletes what's on there, so writes a letter, sends it into the police. Of course, they send it to their analyst, a computer analyst, who is able to get the metadata, and it says, oh, here, we got the last person that used this was St. Lutheran Church, and the user was a guy named Dennis, one named Dennis. So they go to this church, they go, do you have a guy named Dennis who uses your computer? They're like, oh yeah, Dennis Rader. Well, lo and behold. So they have an idea of who this guy is. They want to get more proof. They want to get absolute proof. They got to hone right in on him. So they end up getting some DNA through his daughter, through a pap smear. They got a subpoena to take a sample for her pap smear. And using DNA, we're able to match it with the DNA that officers had kept since 1974 or something like that. So they have been really smart investigators back in 1974. They waited for DNA to come in. They waited for it. So they saved some samples where they were actually, and that led to his conviction. So basically on February 16th, 2005, he sends the floppy disk in, and on February 25th, that same year, 2005, they arrest him 1 block from his home. Okay? His daughter talks him into pleading guilty because he wanted to do a big trial so he could put on a big show like Ted Bundy. His daughter talked him into just pleading guilty to 10 counts of murder, first degree. So he does do that. Those films are on YouTube if you want to watch. He didn't expect that, so he's asked to kind of go through all the murders. He wasn't ready, but he just did it. So he's that's just him at his most normal, you might say. You should check out that if you haven't already watched that. So he gave a detailed account. At the time, the police were aware of 7 murders. He filled them in on 3 more. And there is a chance that there could be more, but we don't know. There is that chance that there could be more victims. That's what the doctor agrees on that too. Catherine, the one who did the book with him. So Rader was sentenced to 9 life terms with no possibility for parole. The victims were 7 adult females, 1 adult male, 1 female child, and 1 male child. 1 injury. That's Kevin, right? Kevin Bright, who was shot twice in the face, or shot once in the face, once in the head, and lived. Okay, so that's it. And here's some notable remarks really quick. He writes a lot of poetry, not very original or very good, but he thought they were very good. He's often writing poetry and thinking and doing codes, even with his daughter and the letters he sends his daughter for birthday. They're all online. She's released a whole bunch of them for you to view online. So look at the way he talks to her and sends codes. He's constantly in code land, okay? Fantasy land, this guy. So he cuts pictures of various celebrities we find, and he likes to draw gags over their mouths, some famous celebrities. He's always thinking in that mode, right? The fantasy mode, when he's fantasizing. He's got an exaggerated sense of self. He did not sense the enormity of his own crimes, could get angry at certain scenes of violence on television, while he himself was a murderer and had killed children. I mean, yeah, so I'm getting some of this stuff from thankfully from Catherine, who did the book with him. I'm getting a lot of this updated, really cool stuff. So I'm glad I found her. I'm glad she did that book. I'm glad Rader told her about everything. He's highly self-important and expected worldwide recognition. He wanted to be famous. He was upset that Ted Bundy was getting all the recognition. He actually wrote into them once and said, how many people do I have to kill to get some recognition here? He actually said that to them. Okay? Well, most of you people know that. Okay, so he thought of himself as much smarter than he actually was. He had a distorted self-perception. So he thought he was pulling the wool over our eyes, and we're like, no, I know what you're doing. You're not fooling me. So he had a very distorted perception of what he was thinking he was doing when he was actually doing. There was this break of his mind. So his spelling errors are atrocious. If you've looked at his spelling, it's incredible. For a guy who's did 4 years university and comes out with a major, it's pretty bad. So he's got this blind spot about himself. It's very interesting. I took note of that anyway. I don't know if you want to. He loved the attention and publicity he was getting. He wanted to be famous for sure. Okay. He has a distorted self-perception. I already mentioned that. And this shows in his what he thought was meticulous pre-planning. Remember when he thought that the family was just the 3 people there, and then the next thing you know, they have a dog, 2 sons he didn't know about, the dad's home. He doesn't get anything right. Okay. And often his plans go awry. He has a lot of bad luck, but a lot of good luck in not getting caught. A lot of weird luck stuff going on with this guy. He should have been caught a few times, and he wasn't. You know? So there you go. And he also had a lot of bad luck. Nothing ever really kind of went the way he wanted either. So only once. So there you go. Okay, so these blind spots. Murdering and toying with police was a game to him. Okay, he fancied himself a spy working with codes. This is so true. Guy's like living in a dreamland, a fantasy. Fantasy plays such a big role in this guy's life, okay? So that's interesting with his codes and fantasies. He made his own name, bind, torture, kill, but did not live up to it as far as torture is concerned. This is for me. He doesn't live up to torture. He's given that to himself. Now, if I think of torture and true crime, I think, I don't know, Randy Kraft, Robert Burdella. There's 2 people that torture. If you compare them to the BTK, there's no torture at all with the BTK. Now, granted, it is beyond torturous for a mother to be there, awake, and watching her 9-year-old son being strangled. It doesn't get much more torturous, true. But what I mean by that is that he's probably not even aware of the effect he's having on the mother, maybe. Not fully aware. Like he think like it's almost like an intellectual emotionalism. It's really weird with this guy because he's always trying to comfort people. He mentions it like 100 times over in his confessions, right? Oh, I tried to comfort them this way. She threw up, so I I wanted them to be comfortable, so I got him a pillow under his back, and then I strangled him. It's really weird how he has this disconnect. Okay, it's almost sociopathic when they mimic emotion. So maybe he is mimicking emotion. We'll have to look at that later. Okay. So notable. We're almost done here. Good. His factor X. He refers to his murderous desires as factor X. What is factor X? He may not know about this. Actually, he may, because he is so blind about himself. It's really obvious to us what it is, you know, his factor X, but he doesn't seem to know it. So that's interesting about him, is that he wanted the doctor to explain to him what his factor X was. I don't know if she did that or not. It's pretty clear what it is. So his patterns sway a lot, including unplanned murders and change of MO. He's kind of interested in the way he can sway and doesn't stick to the path. He's kind of spreads out and expands in all kind of weird directions. He's not as regimental and rigid as, or he's doing this because of his knowledge of being a good serial killer, whatever. Okay, so let's get some of the words up that I put. We're going to do the chart now, people. We're heading to the heavy. What have you got? Just the words, no planets, right? Okay. My first words are rope, bondage, and strangulation. Those are what kind of he's all about. He's all about bind and kill. Not so much torture to me, but bind and kill for sure. Bind to me is everything. Bondage. That's what he's about. Okay? And we had those words we used before, the orgasmic conditioning. Okay? That's how that's his factor X, is that he's been his sex is completely and intrinsically connected to his to rope, suffering, helplessness, fear. It's all in. He gets off on that. So that's his sexual outlet. Remember, his mother was with the ring in there, and then he's gotten off on. That turned him totally on, and so that's what he's looking for in all of his victims. Okay, so did you come up with that planet? The one planet to rule them all. That's right. Did you get it? Well, pause and find it, please. Okay, did you get some other words written down? Have you been going through some stuff? This might be the time to pause and come back, okay? Because I'm going to whip through this. Okay, here we go. Rope, bondage, and strangulation. Now, when I approach this as a profiler, what is that to me? Well, strangulation is based on restriction. I'm thinking of planets, okay? When I'm doing this all the time, or, planets, signs, houses. So I'm thinking, what is strangulation? Well, that's restriction. That's restriction of the air. You're restricting the air to get through to the brain. What is bondage? That's restriction of the body, not to move. What is rope? That's what you use to restrict the body or to restrict the air. Restriction, restriction, restriction. That's what I want. That's my word that I kind of centered in on. Restriction. That's what it is. Remember, planets work by energies, okay? And that's what you want. What is the energy? There's all expansive energy, like blue light. And then there's that which draws all light in, like the color black, right? That kind of thing. So this guy is going for restriction, pure restriction. What planet is that? Have you figured it out? Pause me and find it if you want it, because I'm about to give it away. Okay. It is Saturn. Did you find it? Saturn rules restriction. Saturn rules strangulation. Saturn rules rope. Saturn rules bondage. Now, bondage you have to be careful with, because sometimes there's a power thing going on that you have to eliminate. Every word kind of has two sides to the coin, remember? Always have to be careful about your words, because that's everything where you have to be 100%. So if I did not know BTK and I'm thinking, this guy could be all about power, that's no longer Saturn. That could be Mars or Pluto. Very interested in power as far as planets go, okay? That would be maybe Mars or Pluto I might want to look into, right? For power. For him, not so much. I'm not looking for that. I didn't see that as a power thing for him because I know too much. But whatever. Okay, so I would be eliminating those things. But by the looks of it, when you get rope and bondage and strangulation, it's not. But the way he did it and the way he went about it was not about power. You could tell. It wasn't about power. This guy didn't even have any sexual contact with any victim, post-mortem or pre-mortem, while still alive. There was no sexual intercourse. What he got off on, his sexual part, was Saturn, restriction. He needed to see them, but it doesn't stop there. Okay, now fear is also Saturn, by the way. Just as a tidbit for you, fear. So what did he want to see? He wanted to see fear, pain, suffering, that look of I can't get away type thing. Remember with Harvey Glatman? Let's pull that up again. That look right there. Where's the picture? That look right there is what he's going for in every single victim. And that's the picture. He would just love that picture. And there's plenty of that particular victim online. It's very sad. She's actually quite young, that model. She thought she was going to be part of a detective magazine. That's why the bondage. That's how he got her into the bondage. So that's sneaky too. Maybe Rader got his idea from that too. Because he did that. Harvey Glatman, right? Said he was a photographer, and then he wanted this particular girl to do a detective magazine where she's in bondage and all kinds of stuff. So she actually did a little bit of topless in there. I have a top, yeah. I can't show that, but there was he slowly slipped her down once she was bound and stuff like that. And then, of course, he murders her too. But he's not the same as BTK. Okay, let's go on. So rope, bondage, and strangulation. That's all restriction, people. That's all Saturn. Okay? So what the heck happened? Now, we got to go to the chart. We need to confirm this, don't we? This has to be 100%. That's my 100% word there. As you probably guessed. That's all he's about. So that's 100%. We need those words, man. Right? That's a 100% word. He's all about rope, bondage, strangulation, asphyxiation. That's it. That's his thing. So we know that's a 100% word that we have to find. Right? So that we know that it's Saturn. So what's going on with Saturn? Let's take a look. Saturn is in Cancer, which is of the emotions, okay? It's in that which rules family. Interesting. Things that you bond to. Stuff like that. Represents the home and whatnot and the emotions. Here, Saturn is in there, not a very emotional planet. Okay, it's in the 12th house of the subconscious mind. Interesting. So we need more details on Saturn. What's going on with Saturn? And to do that, you need your aspects, right? So what is Saturn connected to? What is going to tell? That's not good enough. Saturn's in Cancer in the 12th house. So what? So what? That tells us nothing, Mike. Here's what tells us the details, the individual. Mercury is square Saturn. Oh, well, that changes everything. Where's Mercury? Mercury is in the Mercury's in the ninth house of philosophic morals and stuff like that, higher thinking and education, right? If the time of birth is correct. I, again, do not know if this time of birth, I always hold it suspect. Times of birth, I just don't trust them. So whenever I'm talking about the 12th house or houses, I'm using that tentatively. I can't say any house is 100% because I sometimes don't trust the people who put these times of birth up. The person who put this time of birth up put down Wichita as his birthplace. It's actually Pittsburgh. Okay? And they're right beside each other, and it doesn't change my houses or anything. When I did update my stuff, nothing changes, so that's fine. But I don't know whether I trust that. So what I'm focusing on is the planet in the sign and the aspects. Okay? That's what I always focus on. And if you focus on that, that's the best way. Worry about the houses last sometimes. Just use them as tentative. Okay? So Mercury in Pisces. What's Pisces? Ooh. If you look at it, you'll find, I don't know if you want to pause me here and take a look, but Pisces is the planet of fantasy. The sign of fantasy, sorry. Pisces is the sign of fantasies and stuff like that. Drama and fantasy. Yeah. Mercury in the sign of fantasy, squared, active, if you've watched, episode 4, active to Saturn. This is always ongoing in his brain, man. It's a connection between mind and ropes and bondage and strangulation. Like that. That's a huge thing. That's where his mind's at. In strangulation. Mercury square Saturn. That's beautiful for us. Does it stop there? Au contraire. Au contraire. There's more. And something bigger comes up. Remember, we were talking about orgasmic conditioning and his, paraphilia, I think it was called. Paraphilia, right? We got to find paraphilia because it's a psychological problem, man. Here we get it. You ready for this? Saturn square Neptune. Right? Saturn in the 12th house of the subconscious mind. Interesting. Right? Things he's not really totally in control of or aware of sometimes. And it's over there with Neptune in Libra in the 3rd house. Local travel, social activity. Yeah, he killed locally, totally. Right? he was always local when he killed. He just stuck locally. He didn't even change state. Where other serial killers, but he didn't have the time anyway. But he did it locally, basically. Neptune. Now, Neptune is what? That is the ruling planet of Pisces. We're back to imagination. Excellent. Saturn, your planet of strangulation, bondage, is square to Neptune, fantasy, right? So we've got that connection now. But there's something even bigger. If you've watched episode 4, at the very end, I talk about combinations between a lot of planets. So I talk about T-squares, grand trines, stelliums, and clusters. Right at the end of there. Well, here we have a T-square. We're going to talk about that because that's a part of it. So he's got Mercury opposite Neptune. Okay? These ones are in opposite. So he's struggling with his fantasies and keeping balance. There's your Libra, right? That's an air sign. That's bringing it to his head. Okay, there's a bit of an imbalance there. There's an opposition. They're struggling with each other. Okay, Mercury in Pisces, fantasy, opposite to Neptune. Now we got maybe have a psychological thing here, some blindness coming in. We were talking about before. This person, now remember, Mercury is communication, his writing and everything. He has a problem with writing and stuff, and his image and what he sees is not often what is. Because what is Neptune also? And we probably learned this. We learned this with Jeffrey Epstein. Neptune. Deception. Remember? With Jeffrey Epstein. Big time deception. Mercury. Opposite Neptune. This guy's self-deluded. Right? He's self-deception. That's what that is. It is square to Saturn. So his sexual stuff, you might say, is denoted in Mercury opposite Neptune. And both Mercury and Neptune are square to Saturn, forming a giant T-square. So we have Mercury opposite Neptune, and they're both square to Saturn. And Saturn, if you remember from the episode 4, is the outlet of the T-square, where the energy comes out and finds realization in our day-to-day life. So it's not in the sun, it's not in Neptune, it comes out in Saturn. It comes out in strangulation. It comes out in asphyxiation. It comes out in rope. He has a sexual thing with rope. Fantasy. Pisces. Right? With the fantasy Neptune square to Saturn. Two fantasies blended with the mind, psychological stuff, over to Saturn in the 12th house of the subconscious mind. That is factor X. If you're wondering what factor X is, that's the largest portion. Remember, it takes the whole chart. You have to look at the whole chart. But that is the big part of his chart. That is BTK. Is Mercury in Pisces. Don't even worry about the houses, okay? Don't let them forget about even that 12th house. Don't worry about it, okay? What we want, what we need to see, we see. It is Mercury in Pisces, opposite Neptune in Libra, squared. Both of them are squared to Saturn. That's huge, okay? For what he does, that's actually telling the tale of the BTK. Bind, torture, kill. Bind and kill especially. There's no torture involved yet. Okay? So now we know. Now we know. Okay, so the fantasies. Now that's number 4. Fantasies, we've already covered that. It's ruled by Pisces, Neptune, 12th house. Need I say more? We've just covered that. Okay? His fantasies are indelibly linked to rope, bondage, and strangulation. Right? Saturn. Because we have Pisces, Neptune, square to Saturn. Right? And his mental mind, where his head's at. So there you go. In a nutshell, that's pretty obvious. Right? That's pretty obvious. That's like 100%. You nailed it. Right? If you've picked Saturn as being the most outstanding thing. Maybe you got the fantasies with Pisces and Neptune, hopefully. I don't know. Did you pick these? Go ahead and pick these. Put me on pause. Pick planets for these words. Put me on pause. Pick planets or signs, whatever you need to do, and then come back later. Okay? See how you did. Because I'm going to continue. Okay? There's been no sexual assault. Fantasy only. That's just a remark I want to make. He functions 100% on fantasy. Okay? He doesn't have sex with any of them. He rapes no corpse or no living person. Okay. No sexual assault. Okay. That's something to think about. Orgasmic conditioning. Okay, orgasmic conditioning. Sorry, I'm just still getting over this cold. It's never leaving. It's COVID, you know. Orgasmic conditioning. I put Saturn and Neptune. What did you put? Right? Saturn and Neptune. That tells the whole story for me when I'm looking at that. That tells the whole story of orgasmic conditioning. Okay, there's this fantasy he's got going with bondage, and it's kind of stirred up his fantasies and stuff. We're going to have to look at Venus and see what's going on with Venus later, because we know that's the planet of courtships, right? But he also led a pretty normal life with his wife and kids, didn't he? So maybe we won't see something there. I'm interested in what the crimes are. Paraphilia, again, Saturn, Neptune. We can see paraphilia come right out in Mercury in Pisces, opposite Neptune in Libra, square Saturn in Cancer, and possibly in the 12th house with the subconscious mind. Okay? Let's continue and find out. Now, another thing I put was narcissism, which I also include with vanity and conceit, all this kind of going together. Sometimes this is by there's some stuff that the sun, you'll see I did the sun with Leo, 5th house. That's to cover all my bases. Remember? So if I'm looking at the sun, I know that it rules Leo. I want to put Leo. I know that Leo is also the 5th house. It's the 5th side. So it rules the 5th house. So all three work together. Remember that from the other videos? That's why I did that. Number 4. Jupiter, whose secret number is number 4, by the way. Jupiter, I also included, of course, because that rules vanity and narcissism and conceit as well. You could get it from the sun being in certain places if it's overblown with the ego, you know, an overblown Leo, overblown sun, overblown 5th house, perhaps. Not so much the 5th house. Remember, that's an area of life. The planet's your actor, signs the role it's playing, and the house is the surroundings, where the scene takes place. So I'm looking at the sun Leo, Jupiter. So what do we get? Well, the sun is opposite to Jupiter. The sun is in Pisces, his fantasies. It's opposite to Jupiter, which also rules vanity and conceit. They're battling it out with an opposition, right? So they're unstable. Interesting. Jupiter's in Virgo for his planning and stuff. You can see how he's overblowing it, and then with the opposition, he's going one way, then going the other. Does too much one way, does too much the other way. He's overblowing the situation. Well, that's what he kind of does in real life, right? He overblows things. He goes too far, goes back, he reacts, overblows, screws up. He's not as detailed as he should be when he's doing his research, and that shows too. From we have. Let's continue. We also have Mercury, as we were talking about earlier. The Sun and Mercury are both opposite Jupiter. So his mind is overly expansive and then comes back and shrinks and then comes back out. He has trouble finding a balance for his vanity and stuff. So it's coming out. It really shows itself. It's not very intellectual. It's kind of sloppy. Okay? It's kind of sloppy. So it's very weak because Jupiter needs strength. Okay? And it's actually been weakened quite a bit. The moon is said to be trine Jupiter, but the moon would not give it stability because the moon is fluctuating, watery, and changeable. So he really has a weak Jupiter, and that really shows. Okay, for him thinking that we can't see through him. Okay, so that's somebody. So that's your narcissism right there. This is the Sun in Pisces opposite Jupiter, and the Sun and Mercury are both opposite Jupiter. Okay, so they're imbalanced. They stand out big because they involve big planets. The Sun is the biggest planet. Mercury is your thinking mind. There's two big planets, and it's attached to your vanity. And vanity with the Sun and vanity with Jupiter are both involved. Double vanity, double conceit, double narcissism connotation. Okay? So that's where you can find your Jupiter causing a problem. Okay? Sometimes with Uranus, you can feel very special, but we're not looking at Uranus in that sort of way. So otherwise, I might direct you toward Uranus, who sometimes can make a person feel very special. But he wants to be famous. He thinks he's highly intellectual. He's got this conceit, this arrogance. That's Jupiter, right? And the Sun in this case. More Jupiter than the Sun, actually. Okay? So there you go. That's his narcissism, and it does show in a big way. Sun and Mercury opposite Jupiter. That's what you want. Big, strong planets making Jupiter stick out. Not even so much the Sun. So, okay, it's Jupiter who's really kind of telling the tale. Now, contact with media and police, that's more of his arrogance, and that goes with Jupiter as well. And the third house does rule media. Ninth house rules kind of publishing and media. You can see right there, he's going too far with his putting too much stuff out to the media. Because the media is the third house and ninth house. And he's got Mercury in Pisces in the ninth house, right? Opposite to Jupiter, which is overblowing things and going too far in some cases, or over-exaggerating or misinterpreting, stuff like that, right? Remember, he also has his Mercury opposite Neptune, is also in the third house. So this guy's... he can't remember his own codes. He's very sloppy in kind of ways like that. And that's from the Sun and Mercury opposite Neptune and Jupiter, okay? Those planets is what you want to focus on. Let's get this done. Okay. Spy. This guy often fancied himself a spy. What did you pick? What did you see? What did you do? Okay. A spy is ruled by the 12th house. Secrecy. Behind the scenes, right? Kind of guy. He wants the secrecy and stuff and deception, and nobody knows what he's doing. There's a few ways that comes out. For one, you have Saturn in the 12th house. Fair enough. And Mercury is square. His mental mind is square, Saturn in the 12th, so that he could see himself as a spy that way. There's also another way that this might come out. And that is through Mercury in Pisces, which rules the 12th house. So there, Saturn's in the 12th house. The 12th house is ruled by Pisces, the 12th sign. So there's 3 Pisces coming out right now that I'm coming at you with. 12th house, ruled by Pisces. Then we go over here and we have the Sun and Mercury in Pisces, opposite to Neptune, which rules Pisces. 3 Pisces in a row, all kind of working with that T-square again. Here we get the spy thing going on. That's more like Mercury in Pisces opposite Neptune in Libra in the 3rd house, in the 9th house. That's where the strongest spy stuff comes from, not from Saturn in the 12th. It's really speaking volumes if you read about it with Mercury and Sun in Pisces, all that fantasy, across from being realistic and stuff like that. With Jupiter's usually a little bit more sensible, but he's made insensible because of the oppositions. He's going too far, then he restricts too much. He's not balanced because he's in opposition. Okay? Jupiter's being attacked by the Sun and Mercury in opposition, and he can't get the balance. Okay? He struggles with that a little bit. He's a little bit off. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so that's your spy stuff really there with Neptune, kind of, and his conceit all wrapped up in there. You know, so maybe those houses are telling a little bit more. Maybe that is a good time. Does seem to fit. But I don't really need it. I got Pisces and Libra. I always look for the signs because later there's going to be a ton of people we don't know what time they were born. But we can work with just the date of birth and the place of birth. You can get enough information out there to nail somebody. Oh, yeah, you can. Oh, yeah. Okay, codes and games. Again, that's Jupiter in Pisces, thinking that it's smarter than other people. It's doing these codes. It loves codes, fantasy stuff, blended with the codes, which is Jupiter, kind of, right? Your higher education and dealing with codes and mysteries and stuff like that. That's your mysteries. Our Neptune, you got to solve the crime. You got to solve his puzzle. Okay, so you got a little bit of a Jupiter and Neptune in there. And that's Mercury opposite Jupiter and Neptune. That's what it is. That's his code thing there. So that's all wrapped up. You can see it all wrapped up into one BTK guy, right? And it's a bit weak. It's a bit stupid. The codes are not that smart. It's not difficult to figure out his codes. Never was. It's kind of obvious. You just look for the B, you look for the D. It's just over. It's just kind of fun and games. And that's how he saw it, as fun and games. And that's that frivolity you get with Mercury in Pisces. You know, the fantasizer in the playground of the mind, right? Of the Pisces. Anything can happen. It's made of water, Pisces. And it's opposite Jupiter, which is put everything off kind of like over-exaggerated or under-exaggerated. Like it's made it a bit off, and it's a bit distorted because of Neptune. It's a distorted, right? You have, with Neptune, you've got Saturn square Neptune. So even his planning is a little off. The planning, Saturn is very rigid and blah, 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 blah. It's weakened by its square to Neptune. That's also where his paraphilia is, and his love and his sexuality is all bound in that. And it's all fantasy. It's all Pisces. It's all reliving in the memory and in those fantasies, reliving his mother with the ring, reliving his victims with their bondage. Okay? Adolescent. Why did I want that word? I kind of forget. I wrote it down. Adolescent. He was an adolescent when he wanted to become a serial killer. He was an adolescent when he bonded with when his mind bonded sex and bondage together, and helplessness and fear and pain. Right? This was all done when he was an adolescent. What are adolescents ruled by? Well, young boys are ruled by Mars. Young girls are ruled by Venus. Adolescence, as a word, is ruled by Mercury. Okay? Adolescent boy or girl. Both. Mercury is epicene. It contains both sexes, right? So we have Mercury. I wanted to look into Mercury. I believe that's important because he was an adolescent when all this began. Very important stuff began. He became a serial killer in his adolescence. So what do we have? Mercury we're brought right back to Mercury in Pisces, right? And that's, of course, opposite to Jupiter, opposite Neptune. Okay? Your paraphilia, everything in there, the fantasies, the imbalanced part of it, the weak part of it. There's a lot going on there with his fantasies. He just lives in a fantasy, actually, and he's at odds with a lot of it. He's at the whim of a lot. He's not strong enough to really to... But he does a great job of being a dad and stuff, doesn't he? But anyway, that's his adolescence, and it's connected right with his paraphilia, so that makes sense, because in his adolescence is when he gained the paraphilia. Mercury conjunct Sun in Pisces, opposite Jupiter, Neptune, square Saturn. Remember that all three are working together, right? Is Mercury opposite Neptune, square Saturn. Both of them square Saturn, the T-square. That's the most important thing, is that T-square, right? Mercury opposite Neptune, both square Saturn. Saturn is the outlet. Strangulation is the outlet. Rope, bondage, Saturn in the 12th, remember? Lastly, we're almost done. Good. Finished a little early, maybe. Fame. I put fame rather than status. He wasn't going for status and power, and like we saw with Ghislaine Maxwell, like we saw with Jeffrey Epstein, right? In episodes what was it, 2 and 3, I guess. We saw that. Is that what I did? 2 and 3. I'm getting mixed up in my own episodes. How about that? I'm trying to bring out as many as I can really fast. But yeah. So the first and second episodes, you have the two people very concerned with status. So you get to know status pretty well. We're not looking for Capricorn. He's not interested in Capricorn. He's looking for fame. Fame. Like in the Britney Spears kind of way. I don't know. Just that kind of fun, gamey thing from that Mercury and Sun and Pisces opposite Jupiter, Neptune. That kind of fame, the childish kind of fame. Not very serious. So that kind of fame is ruled by one planet, and that's the sun. Okay? Fame in that sense of just fame. I just want to be famous. So people know me. It's more an ego thing. And the ego is ruled by the sun too, as a planet. The sun rules the ego and that kind of thing. So I put the sun for that. I don't know if anybody else put anything like that, or if you did do status, you might have thrown yourself off a little bit, because that could throw you off. I don't think he's looking for status in that same, well, maybe. He does have Mercury square Saturn. It is kind of there. And Cancer is a cardinal sign, so it might seek some fame there. He does want to be the world's most famous serial killer. So that would, and he wants to, and he does that by strangulation. And to be the most famous serial killer by strangulation, if you want to be famous, would be Saturn in Cancer, because Cancer is a cardinal sign. Remember from episode 4, we read about the cardinal signs and stuff like that? Okay. Cardinal, fixed, and mutable. There's the 4 cardinal signs, Aries, and then you got Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. He's got Cancer, Saturn in Cancer. So it could show some recognition. I wanted to see fame come out of it, a bit of a childish way, and I got that through the sun in Pisces for the fantasy, opposite Jupiter. Oh, look, he wants to expand, but he's not very good at it. He's awkward about it. He's not, but he thinks he's intellectual, of course, but he's very self-deluded, this guy. What he sees and what other people see are often two different things. And that's Mercury opposite Neptune for self-delusion, because Neptune is deception, right? We talked a lot about that with Epstein. So Mercury opposite Neptune. This is self-deception. So there, I've covered all the stuff that I want to do primarily about the BTK killer. And we can wrap up right now, okay? We're cutting out a little early today. Good. It usually takes me about an hour and a half, these shows. So hopefully I've covered everything for you. It was a ton of material to get through. This guy was tough. I did 8 pages of work here. I've got a timeline of every move he made. More pages. I got notes I made on the guy from watching tons of stuff and going through my books. And just wanted to bring out some of the more salient parts. It was a lot of work. But and with Catherine, I wanted to get updated material on the BTK from the latest book, Confession of a Serial Killer, which I hope you'll go out and get, because it sounds like the best book you could possibly have on this man. So there you go. If you're looking for Dennis Rader, I would say, well, we did it at 100%. If you stopped, really, now for 100%, which words did I pick for 100%? Are you wondering? Are you? Probably not. Probably don't care. Here's what I picked for 100%. I wanted to see rope, bondage, and strangulation. I wanted the one planet to rule them all. Saturn, restriction. Restriction is the key to Saturn. All things restricted. Even if a person keeps somebody hostage, and they're restricting their freedom, that restriction is Saturn. If that's what they're really focused on, hostage after hostage, capture after capture, and holding somebody, and that's what they're all about, is holding people, that's Saturn. Everything restriction, where it's pronounced, so pronounced in their life, that you can actually put 100% on it. We could put 100% on rope, bondage, and strangulation, right? Then that's he killed 9 out of 10 people that way, right? He had to stab one because of time. He would have strangled her. He didn't want to stab her. He's not a stabber. So knives never came into it, right? and should not have come. Hopefully you did not put knives. He did that because he was forced to. He has nothing to do with knives. Take a look at his chart. What's going on with Mars? Okay? If you look at it, Mars opposite Pluto, there's a little bit about there with other, with death. There's a little bit with Mars opposite Pluto in Leo in the first house. This talks maybe a little bit about the control that he saw women had over him. That's Pluto in Leo opposite Mars, his masculinity. In Aquarius, interesting, in the 8th house. That's sex. So, and he struggles a little bit there too. Not surprisingly. But his major outlet is elsewhere, and that's actually kind of a red herring. That could throw somebody off, Mars opposite Pluto. Okay? And but that's not what I was looking for. That's what so I wouldn't have found that anyway. It doesn't mean much to me. It may show a little bit of control, right? Venus, he didn't sleep with anybody. His Venus seemed to be doing all right. And we have Venus sextile Saturn, and Venus sextile Saturn, Saturn is rigid, controlled, reserved. So his sex is rigid, controlled, and reserved, exactly as it was. He actually said, me, rape anybody? Oh, no, I would never do such a thing. That kind of attitude. Like I said, when he doesn't see what we see. He doesn't see the damage he did. It's interesting. So Venus sextile Saturn, he's got some good control there on his Venus. The other one is in conjunct to Chiron. I don't even use Chiron. And he's got a square to the ascendant, if the ascendant is actually right there, if that time of birth is right. So I ignore that completely because I'm not looking for it, and it can just lead me. I'm not looking for things. Don't look for things unless they're on your list, man. I shouldn't even be doing this. So I'm not concerned. Not really concerned. You can do things tentatively. Like here, tentatively, we want to know about his Venus because he did stay with his wife. He stayed faithful to her, right? In a sense, in a weird way. There was no sex. All he really has is really one aspect. One aspect. He's got Venus in Aries, which is regimental, militant. And it's sextile Saturn, which is rigid. So he's got this rigidity control over his courtships and stuff. And he did. Stayed with his wife for the entire time until she found out who he was. And then she split really fast. She never returned to the house, by the way. After he was arrested and she found out, she never returned to the house. Couldn't return there. Yeah. So Mercury opposite Neptune square Saturn. You get your T-square out of this. So if you want to study that, that's great because that has everything in that T-square is the BTK killer. The primary elements. Okay, so I picked rope, bondage, and strangulations. Also fantasies would have been 100% because that's what he lived off. He didn't rape anybody. He wanted to see somebody being strangled, and that's what he got off on. That was his it was based on sexual fantasies. So Saturn and Neptune together in Pisces would be the fantasy, because fantasy is more your Pisces, Neptune thing, your fantasies. You hear movie makers and stuff like we talked last week, all the camera and the film and taking pictures. That would be, Rader takes a ton of pictures. And once again, that's not Mercury saying, I'm so interested in what kind of camera you got, like curiosity, like we did in another episode about cameras, about Ghislaine Maxwell light cameras, okay? Or Jeffrey Epstein with his cameras. It wasn't about Mercury, the curiosity about what kind of camera you got. I still have 5 minutes, thank you. It's more, they're interested in the Neptune idea of cameras, the actual pictures and the movie making and the art, right? And that's why we have so much art of BTK Killer. Look at all the art this guy's doing. This guy's very artistic. That's, again, your fantasy. That's Pisces. If you're wondering where he gets the idea to do all these paintings, that's all his fantasies. That's Pisces and Neptune. Again, so what's he drawing? He's drawing the very thing that the T-square is talking about, strangling people to death, right? And that's where his pictures are. He does a lot of pictures for his daughter. He's always drawing, so he's very artistic that way. So that's the Piscean thing. Pisces rules that kind of stuff. Drama and actors, and you get different dramatic stuff out of that, right? And that's where that comes from, if you're wondering. All his drawings and stuff is very Pisces, Neptune And of course, his Mercury is attached to that. So you have to kind of go through that yourself. You'll see how everything is answered. All your questions are answered, okay? I think that's about it. Yeah. So I would have probably stopped there. The paraphilia I left open. I probably wouldn't have put 100% on there because I'm not a psychiatrist, and it may come from some weird angle because I didn't understand the condition as well as I should have. So I put it in there for you, the paraphilia and orgasmic conditioning. And I did find it, like I did put my guesses there, but they were tentative for me. The Saturn and Neptune. Isn't it weird that Saturn is square Neptune? That actually completes it right there, because that would be doing it. Like for me, I chose Saturn because of his rope and his bondage and his strangulation asphyxiation thing. And Neptune I did for the orgasmic conditioning because it's fantasy oriented, not so much physical, right? There's no rape. There's no nothing like that. Could be Venus. That's where that's why I put it tentative. It could maybe be Venus square Neptune. That would produce a similar result. And depending on the signs it's in, it could be that thing. So there's different ways you can get to the same destination. That's why you have to be so careful. And that's why my tentative was orgasmic conditioning, paraphilia, because I wasn't quite sure. Okay. Vanity and conceit. Okay, I probably see that coming out, but I'm not exactly positive how that's going to show. That could show with the sun, or it could show with Jupiter. One of the two. And I don't know which it's going to be, right? In this case, it's both. Okay, fair enough. But that's a tentative for me because I can't put it at 100%. Okay? Spy. You could probably put that at 100% if you want to. I didn't, because we knew that he had a big thing with being a spy. But we don't know. Did he call it a spy? Did he call it mission man? We call it spy. I'm not really sure. I know there was a spy thing going on. He always thought of himself as kind of a spy. But are we just kind of putting a word in for him that he would have used a different word? He used cubing as how he could be normal at home and then go out and murder and then come home and be different people, different things to different people. He called it cubing, which was brilliant. I learned that also from Catherine with her interviews with him. And it's better than compartmentalization, which is often used when people are saying, oh, how can you be a serial killer like Ted Bundy and act so normal one way, be like this another way, and compartmentalization, you only see in certain parts. I like the cubing because it's like a Rubik's Cube. Whatever side you want to show to somebody. Here's the serial killer side. Oh, here's my church side. Oh, here's my family side. He can change the cube anytime he wants. So that's kind of interesting. I like that too. That's just like the doctor liked it. That's Dennis's idea. He calls it cubing. Kind of cool. I don't know. Maybe he learned it from somewhere else. He does take everything else from somewhere else. So we are done. We're at 129 minutes. I want to thank you. And I hope I covered everything for you. And I hope I covered enough that you can go back and see for yourself how this could be BTK and nobody else. I mean, it's pretty obvious how you can land a 100% on this, on rope and fantasies. And if you want to do spy, I did it tentative. You would have found him. You would have found the spy, probably. It's a pretty tentative word. It's not a big deal with the crimes, but it's It's ruled by the 12th house, which is Pisces. Okay, it's hidden behind the scenes stuff. So here you have the Sun and Mercury in Pisces, opposite to Neptune, which is the ruling planet for Pisces, square to Saturn, which is of course in the 12th house, which is the house of Pisces. Pisces. That's spy. But spy is as a word, I wasn't too concerned. Code games, again, that can come out in different ways, in weird ways with Mercury in Virgo. It could have come out that way. There's different ways that somebody who enjoys puzzle games and stuff can come out. And he's totally terrible at it. He's like a kid. So I didn't really want to hone in on that because I wasn't sure where this guy was coming from. And it actually was coming from his childish side, his Mercury opposite Neptune, etc. We're done. We're at the 30 mark. I want to say thank you. I hope I covered everything for you. And I think that was about it. Yeah, adolescence and fame. I went for the Sun, childishness. Okay, until next week, I have no idea who I'm doing. I have to figure out who I'm going to do next week. I can't even give you a heads up of who to expect next week. But I guess that's going to be a surprise. And I hope you enjoyed it. And that's it. Peace out. Actually, I'm back. I wanted to mention one more thing. Sorry. The compassion, he kept talking about being Oh, I wanted to make them more comfortable. I wanted to make them more comfortable. He's always talking about that over and over and over. And it was bothering me, man. It was really bothering me. He's always talking about comforting people just before he kills them, getting them pillows, making them more comfortable. He actually wanted them to be comfortable, okay? If you're wondering where that came from, because it plays such a big role, it really does. If you're wondering where that comes from, okay, you're looking at Pisces, which is highly empathetic as a thing. It's very emotional and feeling. Now, he does have some squares to Saturn, which Mercury square Saturn. I don't think he's a full-out sociopath, psychopath, but Mercury square Saturn could represent somebody like that who's very cut off and very cold and distant and doesn't feel the other person's pain or misery. Could be like a sociopath. Could be thought of as a sociopath by many people. Many people might consider him a sociopath. That would be Mercury square Saturn. I think he's got a little bit more going to him. I don't think he's a total sociopath myself. I think there's a breakage there where he doesn't feel certain things or see certain things that are right in front of his face. And here, the comfort he wants to give everybody is Mercury and Sun in Pisces, very emotional, empathetic, worried about the world and other people's emotions and stuff. That comes in, and it's opposite Jupiter, right? Jupiter is very compassionate, right? And empathetic and jovial and very kind and stuff like that. So that's your Mercury and Sun in Pisces, opposite to Jupiter. That's why he kept saying, I'm going to make them comfortable, comfortable. Everybody's got to be comfortable before I kill them. Basically, that's what he was doing over and over. If I was listening to this guy talk. It's actually, I'm taking this from Dennis himself. So peace out. We're ended now. Okay. I just wanted to get that last part in there.